another Home Depot certified advantage. Computer color matching.
Hold on, did you say computers?
Right. Our optical computer will match any color perfectly in just 60 seconds.
Well, that's great, but are we talking the best brands?
We'll use our very best paint, Behr Premium Plus. Just bring us any sample, anything, and we'll guarantee a perfect match, absolutely free. At Home Depot, low prices are just the beginning.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Frank Lamar, and I'm a software engineer at the Home Depot.
My name is Alvaro Ramirez del Villar, and I am a staff software engineer at the Home Depot as well. And we're on the Enterprise Engineer Enablement developer tools. We are GitHub admins for the Home Depot.
All right, so we came today to talk to you about our experience managing GitHub at scale. So we're enterprise customers, so we're not using GitHub.com. We have our own on-premise installation. And we just wanted to share some of our experiences, joys, and challenges about what that looks like. All right, we're going to cover managing GitHub at scale. We're going to migrating from SVN to GitHub, which was our original version control system. Then we're going to talk about CI/CD the hard way, what we learned implementing CI/CD along with some other more modern software development practices. And then that kind of took us out of whack. And then how we came back to getting on the right course and keeping our instance stable and our developers happy.
So to understand this whole journey, I think what you need to understand first is kind of the environment prior to all of this transition. So before we transitioned to GitHub and we did the whole digital transformation, we had kind of a central governance for all of our developers. So that means that we had managers and admins making decisions about what kinds of languages developers could use. We had decisions around what kind of build systems they could use, and we had strict and strong controls over all of those things. Now, that doesn't sound like the kind of collaboration and whatever else that went on next door here. So let's talk about how we got there, right? So this wasn't some evil plot, right? We had a lot of management and admins saying, we don't want our developers to have to worry about how do I build this software? How do I deploy this software into our complicated environment? So what we did was we said, all right, we're going to go ahead and create tools. We're going to create some structure, some things like this that will allow developers to just worry about developing. All they have to do is worry about the business processes, the different business logic that they need to write and things like that. They don't have to worry about how do I get this deployed to our QA environment? How do I get this deployed to our production environment? So we took care of all that for them. The only issue with that is as that kind of self-ingrained, it became a really tight noose around our developers, right? So we had very strict controls. We didn't let our developers choose the language that was appropriate for the software they were writing. We told them, this is the language you need to write in. This is the build tool you need to use. This is how we progress from one stage to another. And that, kind of made management look a little bit like this. And eventually, the developers saw us more like this. We have this power, but we're not using it correctly. We look kind of like buffoons, right? And so somewhere along the line, everybody that was kind of giving that direction realized, wait a minute, this isn't the right way to do it. We need to loosen our reins. We need to let go of a little bit of this control and give the developer a lot more power.
All right, so when we gave developers that freedom, they had an initial reaction. They were excited. They were excited to see the culture of the Home Depot changing. Generally, enterprises move really slow, especially large enterprises. But they were really excited they were getting this same opportunity to move fast, more like a traditional software company. In addition to taking the reins off, we also allowed them to use whatever language. We were no longer just a Java shop. If you thought Python was the right choice, then by all means use Python. If you thought JavaScript was the right choice, by all means use JavaScript. If Jenkins was too heavyweight of a build tool for what you needed, use what you thought was best. If you felt like Maven was better than Gradle, then you had the freedom to choose, you had the freedom to do that. We also implemented a lot of things from Agile Manifesto as well as Extreme Programming. environment. We introduced retros where teams got a chance to voice what they felt like the team was doing right and the team was doing wrong. They had more control over their destiny. And this got teams really excited about code. Developers could then, whether you do a greenfield project or a legacy project, you had the opportunity to assemble your code, assemble your tools the best way that you saw fit. As a part of that transformation, developers requested a more modern version control system, and GitHub seemed to be the de facto standard, and they were really excited about using GitHub. We became GitHub Enterprise customers. We became GitHub Enterprise customers, but the engineering teams had shot first. Some of them already had Rogue, GitLabs, and other Bitbucket servers out there, but once we said that GitHub Enterprise was coming, the developers were happy. We created the instance and we set it up initially with a small group of developers. A couple of teams were allowed to test it out, and then we opened it up to the enterprise at large, and everyone was really excited. We gave teams an entire year to migrate. So if you had a legacy project on our old version control system, that would still be available to you for 1 year, and at the end, we'd be turning it off, and we expected everything to be in GitHub Enterprise by that time. If you were having a greenfield project, you're starting brand new, we encourage you to start with GitHub from the beginning. So how do you think that turned out? You think everybody was ready to go by the time the cutoff date? Exactly. No one was ready. It was like herding octocats. All right, so all these new changes going on. Another thing that we embraced was CI/CD. And CI/CD, depending on who you ask, can have different definitions and can mean different things to different people. The definition that we settled on was continuous integration, continuous delivery. Because we're enterprise, we're not moving as fast as other quote-unquote software companies. We need to bundle features together and then come out with releases, depending on what your sprint was, every 2 weeks or every week. Okay, so this is a kind of outline of what the CI/CD process is. I'm not sure how technical the room is, but basically the development is ongoing. As soon as you get a new set of features that you want to build, you build an MVP, release that as soon as possible, you iterate over it, get it into your hands of your users, you get feedback, and you continue to iterate on that over and over again. So that's kind of what we were doing in the continuous integration, continuous delivery model. So that was great in theory, but when it came to actually implementing that, we ran into some issues. We had one group of pioneers who were kind of really at the forefront, kind of like the thought leaders within our organization driving this. And the tool that most of the teams at Home Depot used for CI/CD was Pivotal's Concourse CI. So that team of rebels that was kind of like driving this, they created a template project that other developers were supposed to study and learn how CI/CD would work and then build their own CI/CD pipelines from that. So did they study it? No. They just copied and pasted. They copied and pasted this project into theirs to create their pipelines without fully understanding what it meant and what the ramifications would be.
So what happened?
Oh, I skipped ahead. Yeah, so they copied that project without fully understanding what the ramifications would be. Concourse CI, oh, well, I'm skipping ahead, my bad. We're talking about the ramifications.
So what happened? we fell over, right? So we were unaware of it at the time, right? So most of the Concourse CI talk that we just gave, we kind of learned about after this terrible thing happened, right? Our instance fell over. And as the good software engineers that we were, we increased memory, we increased everything, CPU, memory, made a huge instance because we were running out of bandwidth. We were running out of resources, so we just increased everything. Now, that had some secondary side effects inside the VMware space where we were being vMotioned and the instance was unstable. Here, I'd like to do a quick shout out to the GitHub support folks who helped us figure out a lot of what was happening with our instance at this point. They were actually the ones that suggested for us to look at the clones, because they said, wait a minute, guys, you have tons of pull requests coming in. You need to go look at that and figure out what is going on there. And this is what they gave us. They said, here, we're seeing a lot of clones. You can use this grep against the babel-d log to see the counts for you and figure out where they're coming from, what they're doing. So this was our first attempt at kind of mitigating the problem, before we even knew what it was, of why our instance was so unstable. So as you can see here, we're just hitting the babel-d log. We're grepping for git upload pack, which is what happens when you do a git clone, right? Any git clone triggers this. We're separating it by repo, and then we're sorting it, and then we're writing it to a file. Now, this was our kind of first attempt at how to figure out, one, what was going wrong with our instance, and then two, how do we get the word back out to the developers, the users, to say, hey, guys, you're killing us. We need you to help, right? So this created a file. We used that file. We grabbed it from our instance. We posted that file using Slack, our inter-office messaging software. We wrote emails to the highest level users. And in addition, since we were sorting on repo, it kind of gave us an indication that what's happening here is that Concourse CI, right? Is that the new build system is polling too much, and it's not really working out for us. So after all of this research that we did and notifying the users, what would you expect would happen in an organization that, of responsible people, right? No, nobody did anything. Nothing changed. We sent emails, but there wasn't really understanding of what the issues were, who was doing it, why it was happening. People that we would contact that were using Concourse said, no, I only have 2 or 3 builds a day. I don't know why you think that I'm polling 7 million times per day, right? That's not me. But so what did we have to do? Right? We had to enter into kind of aggressive negotiations, right? So we had these high-intensity users that were assaulting us unbeknownst to them a lot of times. And what we decided to do in order to avoid this situation, right, which was Concourse trying to dest our poor GitHub Enterprise instance, was we created, no. All right, so what we did was we started posting in Slack in an automated fashion, right? So we would post the top 50 users, and we said, hey guys, here are the people that have started doing kind of too much polling, right? And so that public venue of posting really kind of started turning the tide a little bit so that we could avoid the disaster that would be this.
So we also had to educate our development community since they had adopted Concourse CI, and that was the CI tool of choice. We kind of had to educate them on how it worked. Like Concourse, these green squares and rectangles represent tasks, and a task is like a single unit of work, and those are jobs. And then inside a job, you have tasks, and tasks are a single unit of work. The black rectangles that you see on the outside are resources. So resources are things that you're pulling into your project. Those could be source code, those could be dependencies, things like that. So the way Concourse works is for every task runs inside its own Docker container, and it polls, as it was working at the time, it polled your resources constantly, regardless if you were actually kicking off a build or not. And so this is where we saw the orders of magnitude increase in the number of our clones, because whether they were polling or not, everyone copied this one project that said, poll GitHub every 5 seconds. So some teams, they use one pipeline for their entire app, and some teams use one pipeline for their entire microservice. So we saw a jump of like 5 million clones in a matter of a few weeks, and that we ultimately traced the root of our instability down to that. So this is coming up with ShaneBot. All right, so without consulting our HR, we decided we got to really get these guys' attention, so we created ShaneBot. ShaneBot was a bot that was written as a Python Slack bot that we used to communicate to our developers and really like kind of post it on the wall. Here are our high clone users. Here are our high intensity users. So the private emails didn't work, the private Slack messages didn't work, but once it became public and when the entire development community was aware of who was doing the high clone and who was doing the high using, then people were coming to us. How can I lower my clone use? How can I get out this list? People did not want to be put out as the people who were responsible for the instability that we were seeing in GitHub.
So how did we write ShameBot? Obviously pair programming, right? Here we go, perfect example. We got together on our team, collaborated a little bit using GitHub, and figured out the best way to get ShameBot going. That initial post of ShameBot to our public Git Slack channel, well, enterprise-wide, really got people to notice. We got contacted by managers of these different users saying, hey, what do I need to do to get my team off of this list? Because I don't want to be there, right? And so that really kind of helped us and probably got a reduction of our clone numbers by around 15 to 20%, just right off the bat within the first couple of weeks. So how does it work? We take the Babel log, which has a wealth of information from your GitHub instance. We pull it down to the servers that we run to process, and then we write some reports. Today we're doing daily reports and weekly reports to Slack. So let's take a look at it. This is an initial version of our ShameBot. I tried to get what our current looks like, but surprisingly, PowerPoint is not the best way to show people code. So when you have a lot of it, it starts looking like gobbledygook. So what I did was, this is kind of our first attempt, which shows in very basic fashion what we're doing. So we've iterated on this and made it a little bit better, but the bones are here, right? So what do? We grab our Babel log, and we do a zgrep against our GitHub string, which could be git receive pack or git upload pack. While we were creating the ShameBot, we thought that using only the stick and no carrot is probably not the best approach. So in addition to pulling all the clones, we also grabbed all the pushes, all the commits, the good stuff that people were doing on the instance. And we said, let's reward the people that are doing a great job and really committing to all this code, and then let's call to light some of the other practices that have been going on. So this command will be called in either clone or push mode, and it will grab that git receive pack or the git upload pack. When you're grabbing the pushes, though, if you have any sort of replication or a replica enabled, you'll get multiple versions of multiple logging of that same push. So again, GitHub support helped us out here. We said, hey, we're seeing 7 pushes for the same thing. How does this work? And they said, oh yeah, just filter on this, and then you'll only get the one per push. So what we do is we grab that log, and we SSH it and output it into our processing server. At that point, this one is a function that processes our user counts. So we have the input of that log that has all of our pull requests. What we do is we then pull out just the username, which you can see that log entry is a key value pair log. So we look for the user item and then grab the next one after splitting it on all the equal signs. So once we grab that user, the Babel log has a wealth of information, but it stores, depending on how you did the clone, either with a login or with a token or with however, it stores the user information slightly differently sometimes. So here, that second awk is we're doing a translation based on if you use a token or not. Then what we do is we just count all the names and we display them next to the count by name, and then we sort it in reverse order. Then we run our daily Slack job that will post this information to Slack for us. Our original thing, as you saw, outputted a file, and we started going down that route to see if we could programmatically post a file to Slack. That posed some problems. There was not really some good documentation there, so we decided instead to just post text. So here, this function, what it does is does a lot of formatting around how we want to display that text so that users can consume it and it's not just some random smattering of names and numbers. So you can see we use ShameBot there. We post it to whatever channel we want. And then it's the Git usage, and the report type is either clones or pushes. So here we're doing top 50 most frequent clones by either user, by org, by repo. We break it down. The commands are very similar based on what you're matching. And then this is a lot of that formatting here in the middle that I was talking about to try and get it to align nicely when you display it on Slack, which is, doesn't have the same type space. And then at the bottom there, we curl it against the Slack webhook URL. And so what this does for us is it displays as a message the top 50 most frequent clones by user, by repo, and then so people can see, oh, yeah, that's my username. I know I don't want to be on this list that has the ShameBot list. So this helped us kind of get the word out there and have people understand that what they were doing and how they were impacting our instance.
All right, so that was ShameBot was one of the tools that we used that we had built around our GitHub Enterprise instance to make our lives as GitHub admin easier. We're a small team. We're a team of less than 6, and we're supporting over 2,000 developers. And GitHub Enterprise is not the only tool that we support. So along with ShameBot, along with GitHub Enterprise, we were getting a lot of emails and spending a lot of our time just handling just GitHub issues. So we said, well, what can we do to automate some of this process to make our lives a little bit easier? One thing we created was GitHub Suspender. So some people still refuse to change. Either they did not know how to adjust their CI/CD pipelines to poll less, or they were just unwilling to. They didn't care. So we created our own suspender. And what our suspender would do would look at GitHub usage activity and suspend based on certain criteria. Another challenge that we faced was managing the seats within GitHub. When you purchase a GitHub Enterprise license, you get so many number of seats. So we had a lot of people who were close to the code but weren't necessarily committing on a regular basis. So like project managers, designers, business analysts who would also sign up for GitHub, log in one time, look at something, and then never log in again, but they were still taking up a seat. It got so bad to one point, I think we were down to like 20 or so seats left, and the very next week we had like 110 interns starting at IT. So it was like, okay, well, we can't go in and keep unsuspending people manually, and that was where GitHub Suspender was born. So it would suspend for bad behavior as well as if you were inactive in the instance for X number of days. So I think we did like 30 or 60 days. And it's in the GitHub documentation on how to go in and do that. And if you suspend a user, all their stuff is still there. Their repos, their commits, their pull requests, everything remains the same. It just, they can't access GitHub, and their license becomes free for someone who's going to be more active in it. All right? So again, we started suspending people for various reasons. Now we started getting a slew of emails, hey, my account is suspended and I need to go back in. And this is now taking up a large portion of our day, so we decided to create our own self-service portal where users could go in and unsuspend themselves. So as long as they still had access to, they had the proper credentials to access GitHub in the first place, they could go in and unsuspend themselves. Again, shout out to the GitHub team who provided us with our very own AutoCAT for our unsuspender that we've used there and a couple of other places. So this really helped us out. The developer community felt a little more empowered that even if they did get unsuspended, we would help them to, they could go in and unsuspend themselves regardless of the time zone or offshore teams or whatever it is. So that was pretty nice. They appreciated that.
So we created ShameBot. We started posting to Slack a lot. But as you guys know, once you see a notification enough times, you start ignoring it, right? It's like, oh, yeah, it's all right. 9 a.m. every day, doesn't matter. Nobody's looking at this. It's not really important. So we decided that we needed a ShameBot 2.0. Let's give ShameBot some real teeth, right? Let's take advantage of some of these tools that we've written for other things and really integrate that into our ShameBot approach. So what were we going to do? We thought internally, we said, all right, a good thing would be let's give them a warning, let's give them a week, let's share the documentation of how to fix their issue, and if they don't respond within a week, let's suspend them for a week. And then maybe they'll get the deal. And if they don't, then we'll suspend them for 2 weeks, and then we'll suspend them for 3 weeks, and so on. But being the good stewards, and we wanted our developers to, not just think that we're these oppressive overlords. We said, let's take it to the community and see what they think. And apparently, people that aren't doing necessarily the best thing don't want to be told that they're not doing the right thing. They don't want to be shamed, and they don't want to be suspended. So, ShameBot 2.0 got a bit of a reworking. Some people call to our attention that maybe the name ShameBot wasn't the best. We meant it as a joke, as kind of some happy times, but some people were like, we shouldn't be shaming our associates. That's not really part of our values wheel, right? So instead of ShameBot 2.0, it became Do the Right Thing Facilitator. Real nice, and it kind of made you feel good about it, right? So, and instead of suspending people, what we agreed upon with the community at large was that we would email the developer that was responsible for these clones, and if they didn't respond in a week, you just escalated it to also emailing their manager. And then if they didn't respond, you could escalate it even higher. But it was a more laid-back approach, a more not quite as aggressive, is what we found that people really wanted.
So another part of our values wheel is building strong relationships. So we realized as the GitHub admin, as development tools team as a whole, that we need to have a better relationship with our development community. So a part of that was inserting ourselves into the training and education area. So as far as like onboarding new associates, we want to insert ourselves into the process of teaching them and educating them on how to use GitHub along with the rest of our tools the right way, so that they're good stewards of the instance from the very beginning. And also, using GitHub Pages, we created our own set of Home Depot flavored usage guides for GitHub Enterprise as well as all of our other tools. So we hosted all this on GitHub Pages, like this is the best way to use this particular tool with the Home Depot stack. This is the best way to be a good steward of the instance, and we want to make that collaborative. We open sourced that. We gave it to the community so that they could edit those pages to reflect the things that they learned out in the trenches, because we're GitHub admin. We're not necessarily building apps that are customer facing. Most of the tools that we deal with are internal facing, and the other developers are our customers. But they may pick up on practices or ways that we can use the tools that's better for the community at large. So we open source that within the Home Depot and allow them to contribute and give back to that education, to that process as well.
And just one thing to add, in that vein of us being more GitHub admins and we're not really as in touch with, say, like how concourse, because a lot of teams were kind of building their own concourse. I want to call out that before we came up with the ShameBot idea, there was a specific fix to the problem of cloning, right? Initially, Concourse did not offer webhooks, right? Home Depot open sourced and collaborated back to that project and added webhook support to Concourse. So at that point is when we said, all right, guys, before there wasn't a way to do it, and if you needed to get your build every 2 seconds, then you had to poll. But now, with webhooks, which I think is even kind of the suggested approach from the GitHub side anyway, now that's available to all the build systems, so you really don't need to be polling unnecessarily. Just for some quick numbers on the polling versus the pushing side that we did ShameBot, FameBot, this morning when the report came out, we had the top repo on the push side was like 100 or so, and the top repo on the pull side was 100,000. So let's say that 100 things were pushed and needed to be pushed out to deployed with the CI/CD mindset. We still pulled 1,000 times more often than we needed to, and that's the kind of behavior that we're trying to encourage users to not do, because that's just a waste.
All right, so that was pretty much our this portion of our experience being GitHub Enterprise customers and managing GitHub at scale and coming into some problems and the creative solutions that we had to implement going forward. So after that, I think that's pretty much all we have, and we're open for any questions that you guys may have for us. Is the source code for ShaneBot out there?
It is on our GitHub Enterprise instance.
If there's interest in that, I mean, we can go back to our leadership and see if that's something that they wouldn't mind us pushing out on github.com.
And it would probably be called Do the Right Thing Facilitator at that point. It won't be called ShaneBot, but you can rebrand it however you like. So we use LDAP for authentication, and LDAP has that level internally. So that's what we're going to use when we do that. So good question. LDAP synchronization actually caused us some headaches at the onset of our suspending. So our initial approach was, so we use a single access group to manage access to GitHub on the whole. So our initial approach was to actually take users out of that group. And that was our only way of suspending, because LDAP Sync, as you know, by default, it'll say, oh, this synced correctly, and you're suspended. I don't know why. Let's unsuspend you. And so that kind of takes away from what we were trying to do. So GitHub Enterprise has an option that you can check, or something you have to do on the console, that turns off that auto unsuspend feature when you're using LDAP Sync. Because what we didn't want was, because LDAP Sync runs every 10 minutes or something, or however often, 30 minutes, however often it is, the things that we're trying to do when we're suspending, we want a little bit longer duration than just the 30-minute suspensions.
Do we use the API to unsuspend spam?
So we actually SSH into the GitHub appliance and suspend and unsuspend that way. I think there were some limitations with the API and either LDAP Sync or something like that. Sorry? Yeah, you can't, like if you don't manage it through LDAP, then you can do it, but if you manage it through LDAP, then you can't do it, and it did this, and so we said, forget it. I know how to SSH into the box, and we programmatically do that and suspend that way.
So I think on our roadmap, we're going to have ShaneBot's going to be able to do that itself. Like once ShaneBot generates its, or Do the Right Thing Facilitator.
Yeah.
Once it gets its list of people who are at the top of the list, it'll be able to go in itself and do those things.
Unfortunately, we are not there yet. So it drops, the list, realistically speaking, drops off at around 200 or so, is really the high intensity repos. And those are repos that, like Frank was saying, that were created by a team to use as a template, right? And so there's also some repos in there that kind of have some common code for the concourse setup that they offered as this template. So those are the ones that are being hammered a lot. Around 200, it drops off to what we consider normal levels. So unfortunately, we haven't had to reduce that number yet. We hope to, though. So the instance itself runs really well. I mean, we have it probably oversized to what the specifications are for our user base.
I think actually our size is bigger than what GitHub recommends. Like they told us, like it's too big.
Yeah, but So our user base is south of 3,000, and we are sized for what they recommend for a user base of over 10,000. And that was because initially we didn't know why we were falling over, so we just threw RAM at it because it looked like it was running out of resources. Hopefully with this, we may be able to, we probably won't bring it down. I mean, we've already increased it. We'll probably just leave it where it is, but it should run better once we get people using it responsibly. So we at Home Depot have a couple of data centers in the US, one in Atlanta, one in Austin, where people mostly work. We have a single instance with replica. That single instance serves everybody. We're looking into some of the new stuff with 2.11. Sounds interesting, so we're seeing if that makes sense for us. But yeah, as of now, that's how we're doing it. So our single instance supports our entire company. So luckily, we haven't gotten to that point yet where it's really detrimental, other than the initial fallover. But once it fell over and we added more to it and then figured out our VMware stuff, it's been running pretty stably. What we're worried about now is we were seeing a trend of increase, right? Because as of this point, the movement is still picking up speed. People are still adopting this concourse pipeline, and some people don't really. They just grab, oh, this code looks good, this looks, and then maybe that causes problems for everybody. So we haven't gotten to the point where we need to really target disabling things, but we could probably, if it comes to that, I think what we would probably do is suspend users so that they couldn't hit the instance anymore. The only thing you really have to worry about is the great amount of logging that GitHub does. So even as you're getting requests, if your requests start growing too much, we actually saw this, it'll take your instance, it'll fall over because your root space will run out.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep an eye on too, that we found out the hard way.
And currently our cluster is cold, hot, warm, and I think on our roadmap, we didn't put that on the slides, but our roadmaps, we're trying to move to a hot, warm cluster, and we want to automate the failover process between the two. So hopefully it's not like we're going to be getting phone calls waking us up in the middle of the night to do that. We want that process to happen automatically.
Well, thanks everybody. Oh, one more. What? I spoke too soon. So I can't hear you. What version of GitHub are we running right now? We are running 2.10.5 or 6.
Yeah.
We're planning on upgrading to 2.11.2 soonish. All right, now you can clap. There we go. Thanks everybody. Thank you for your time.